happened in Buffalo today. Again. For people who don't know, there was a really horrific race-based hate crime. Lots of people were killed. This is heartbreaking and also a crucial reminder of why we continue to do this work and why we will continue to do this work. Our hearts and thoughts and prayers and love go to the survivors and the families. Um, and I hate that this is by far the first Troubler meeting that we have started with a moment like this. So, huge acknowledgement for that before we begin. Um, okay. So, we have recently been starting meetings with a little bit of context about where we are in 2022, and there are two particularly large things that help set the context for today's meeting. And one is what is the leak regarding Roe v. Wade and what is likely to be the Supreme Court overturning of that decision. And I want to say three things that are really particularly important in terms of what you can do related to reproductive rights. And one is show up. Show up at the rallies, show up at the demonstrations. Public outcry makes a big difference. The photograph on the right is Troubler Martha Laird at the rally yesterday. We had several Troublers there. Thank you to all those folks that showed up. So showing up, super important. The second thing is in the emails that we've been sending out, there have been several organizations that are eager for your donations. These are organizations that have been fighting for reproductive rights for years or decades. So we'll be sending their names out again. Support them to the extent that you can. The third thing is if you care about reproductive rights, all of that, in all likelihood, is going to end up depending on what happens in state elections, because any reproductive rights are no longer going to be assured by the federal government in all likelihood, and that means that it's all going to come down to states. So that brings us back to the state elections and 2022. And here's where we are in terms of 2022 state elections. A reminder, and we're going to say this over and over again, Georgia is the most important swing state in the country. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Georgia is the most important swing state in the country. It is the most tightly contested, and every single statewide race should be considered a swing race. So it's a crucial place to be in 2022. In terms of where we are in terms of dates, May 2nd to May 20th, early voting. Early voting is underway right this minute, today. May 24th is the primary election day. um, June 20, in all likelihood, there will be some runoffs for some of the primaries. The primary runoff will be June 21st, and then of course November 8th is the general election. I want to remind folks a little bit about necessary trouble and where we are right now in terms of election work. We had decided that up until the primary, we were not going to be involved in some of the primaries where there are more than, where there's several good, strong Democrats running. We have been very involved with Amani Barnes for House District 86. Necessary Trouble is not doing endorsements in other primaries for May 24th. So we don't have a list of Necessary Trouble endorsements. If you have specific questions you want to put in the chat, if you have specific candidates you're supporting you want to put in the chat, totally fine. If you are wanting some suggestions that are just personal opinions, you can write me, you can write Pat. anybody else who wants to be a resource, you can put your name in the chat. So after the primary, we will be focusing very much on the Abrams-Warnock coordinated campaign. We will be focusing on up and down ballot races in terms of the statewide races, and we will be deciding together on which key House districts we'll be focusing on. In terms of the agenda for today, I want to kind of repeat that if you care about Roe v. Wade and reproductive rights, if you care about what happened in Buffalo today, if you care about gun control, if you care about a host of other crucial issues for our democracy, the things we need to be watching this year are we need to be watching voter protection, and we need to be getting out the vote. To that end, we are going to be focusing both on voter protection and on electoral work for our meeting today. We are going to start by hearing from Naomi Parnes, who is the new Director of Voter Protection for the Democratic Party of Georgia. We'll then be hearing about Necessary Trouble's electoral work, and we'll then be we'll be hearing from a number of other ways in which troublers are working with partners related to electoral work. So on that note, let me do an introduction of Naomi. Naomi Parnes went to Emory as an undergraduate, so this is a little bit of a coming home for her. Thank you so much, Naomi. Went to Georgetown for law school. Has, thankfully for all of us, has a strong background in cybersecurity, and then was the Regional Voter Protection Director in New Hampshire in 2020, became the Deputy Voter Protection Director in New Hampshire in 2021 and 2022. And then early this year, when Syra Draper left the position to run for office, Naomi took over as the Director of Voter Protection for the Democratic Party of Georgia. Naomi, thank you for being in Georgia. Thank you for doing this crucial work, and thank you for talking to us today. And I'm going to mute myself and ask you to unmute yourself and take over here.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you so much for that great introduction. I'm really happy to be back in Atlanta. We just saw some friends from college that I hadn't seen in 13 years this morning. So it's really fun so far. I'm really excited to be here. I have a slide deck. Do you guys prefer a slide deck or not? Because I don't have to share it if you don't want it. I'm seeing some nods. Okay.
Personally, I would. So
yeah, here we go. All right. Can you see the slideshow?
Yes.
Yeah? Yes, great. Oh, I'm on the wrong slide. Sorry for that. Okay, here we are. Cybersecurity lawyer, but not the best at tech. So as Becky said, I'm Naomi Parnes. I'm the Voter Protection Director. First, I want to show you some other faces you might see. Randy Fagan is one of my deputies. She has already started. She spent 4 years at Fair Fight prior to this job, so she knows all of the Georgia actors very, very well, and it's great to have her on the team. And then I have another deputy starting on Thursday, Caitlin Bremmel. She is coming to us from DC, but worked on the Georgia coordinated campaign back in 2020. So we're excited to have her back. She worked with the organizing team in 2020, but she has some great VotePro experience as well. And so we're really excited to have her on the team. So I know a lot of you do voter protection work and know about this, but just a little bit about what voter protection is and why we do it. It's to just ensure that every eligible voter can register to vote, stay registered, vote, and then have their vote counted. So that's our big overarching goal. So what does our team do? We do like a lot of things. They're sort of listed out here, but the big things we do, we train voters and volunteers on voting rules and process. We'll develop voter education materials. We recruit volunteers who will serve on our hotline. They'll serve as poll observers. We assist voters and help ensure fair election by tracking and responding to voting problems. We'll develop a liaison program to help do that. And we use legal, organizing, and political tools to make voting more accessible, and we build relationships. So we do all of these things to make it hopefully easier for folks to vote. And why does it matter? It matters because, I mean, you were talking about this, but voting is the bedrock of all civil rights. We know that long lines disproportionately disenfranchise people of color, new Americans, and younger voters and disabled voters, and that voter suppression is systemic racism. So we're doing all we can to try and limit these issues, but we know that they exist, and that's why we're here. And as Representative John Lewis said, too many people struggled, suffered, and died to make it possible for every American to exercise their right to vote. So that's why we're here, and that's why we care about this and do this work. So we collect a lot of information so that we can try and solve issues and hopefully solve them before October and November when people are voting, but we know they're going to come up then as well. But we collect this information through our voter assistance hotline, through our election administration and liaison program, through poll watchers and observers who are out on the ground, and then through folks like you who will know to call our voter hotline, who can email me if something comes up, and you can flag these issues. So if you hear that your neighbor or friend had an issue, you can tell me, you can have them contact me. So every time I meet with someone, you know, it's through our field organizers as well, but we're collecting information all the time. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about SB 202, what voters need to know, what the big changes are going to be for voters. So the first big changes are with absentee ballots. Basically, the time period that you can request an absentee ballot has been condensed. So unlike before, there is a start date where you can mail in your request. It doesn't count for the whole cycle. You need to mail in an absentee request for every single election, unless there is an exemption if you're over 65, if you're disabled, or if you are an overseas or military voter. So there's that exemption. Those folks can all make their request for the entire cycle. So, but everyone else needs to do it for every single election. And then another big change with SB 202 is it puts in a fine for candidates or organizations that send out absentee ballot request forms if that person already requested a ballot. So if they request it twice, then the organization can get fined. So this means, and this is like a pretty big change, a lot of voters in Georgia are used to getting the absentee ballot request form mailed to them every single year. They fill it out, they send it in. I talked to a woman yesterday on the hotline who was very frustrated because she was past the deadline to request one and hadn't gotten anything mailed to her. So this is a really big change, and we have to do a lot of voter education on it because people are used to that. And it's a big difference to have to get it on your own. We are doing a beta test to like see how people respond to the forms right now, but it was like limited. So we might be sending them out. We don't know. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like because of this law. And then I think this is also a change as well. It used to be that they did a signature match when you signed your application and when you signed your ballot, the envelope, and sent it back. They're no longer doing that, but instead you have to use your same Georgia ID that you registered with and make sure that that's the number you write down on your ballot. And then if you don't have a Georgia ID, you'll have to fill out your date of birth and the last 4 digits of your social. Then you can return it by mail, by Dropbox, or directly to your county elections official. But this is another one of those changes from 2020 because drop boxes are only inside some advanced voting locations. And so they're limited to those hours when those specific locations are open. And they're also just not available as widely as they were in 2020. Okay, so early voting is ongoing. It ends the 20th. If you haven't voted yet, you can go until Friday the 20th. One change is there are only mandatory Saturdays, and you can have separate hours on Saturdays than you have. You can have whatever hours you want during early voting. And there's no voting the weekend prior to election day. So that Friday before the election is always going to be the first, the last day to do early voting. You have to vote in your county during early voting. And then you can drop off your absentee ballot at a drop box at some, but not all early vote locations. So this slide, I would say is like the most important thing that we're going to have to educate voters on election day. So on May 24th, on November 8th, you have to vote at your precinct. In the past, if you were at a polling place in your county, you could get a provisional ballot and it would automatically cure. Now it won't. And so this is something we really have to educate voters on, because we know, I've heard from people all over the state already that say, like, people like to go and vote at the polling location they like to go vote at. It doesn't matter if it's theirs or not. They've been doing it for their entire life, potentially, and that's where they are going to go to vote on election day. So we need to really, really, really educate voters and make sure that they know that if they want to vote at that polling place that's not their precinct polling place, then they need to do advanced voting. And if they want to vote on election day, then they need to go to the polling place where they are registered to vote. We're going to have poll watchers really trying to pay attention to this on primary election day. Basically, what should happen if someone is at the wrong place is that the poll worker should tell them they need to go to the other polling location, and should not give them a provisional ballot, and should look up their polling place and share it with them. But this is new. It's new for the poll workers too. They might get confused. So we're going to be seeing, like, do they do that? Do they hand them a provisional ballot? And then we'll work really closely with election offices to try and make sure that all of the poll workers know what to do as well. If you are at a polling location after 5 p.m. and you're at the wrong one on election day, you can sign an affidavit that says, I won't have enough time to get to my other polling location, I need to vote, and then be given a provisional ballot. So those are the only folks who should be giving provisional ballots for being out of precinct. And we're going to train our poll workers really well on this. But this is the biggest change that, like, if you should be telling your friends, tell everyone, this is a really, really big change. And now I'm just going to go over a little bit of, like, who can register and how to vote quickly. So anyone in Georgia who's a US citizen, a Georgia resident, who's 17 and a half and will be 18 on the date of the election, who's not currently serving a sentence or on probation for a felony conviction, or who has not been found to be incompetent by a judge, can register and vote in Georgia. There are 3 main ways to vote in Georgia. Sort of went over them already in the SB 202 slides, but those are absentee or vote by mail, early in person, also called advanced voting, and election day, or in person on election day. And you need an ID to vote in Georgia. So if you don't have a Georgia state issue ID, and you are applying for an absentee ballot, you need to provide a copy of the ID that you are registering with. And if you go to vote, you can bring any of these IDs. You don't have to have a Georgia ID. And poll workers should be checking your ID for proof of identity rather than for proof of where you live. So it doesn't even have to have your residency on it. So you can bring any of these: a valid state or federal government ID, a Georgia's driver's license, a student ID from a Georgia public school, public college or university, an employee photo ID from the government, from the US government or the Georgia government, a valid passport, a military photo ID, or a valid tribal photo ID. And now we can get to questions, and I see some. So on mailing the absentee ballot forms, I think we're going to be able to do it. There is a, I don't know how many of you are lawyers, but there's a safe harbor in the law that says that if you basically check the data list to see who requested it and send out, and that data that you relied on, you rely on it like quickly enough and send out the forms within like 24 hours, that you won't be fined. So I think there's going to be a way for us to do this anyways, hopefully, but we'll see what happens. Any other questions? That is a good question. So Martha asked, where can people find early voting location and hours? The best place is to go to their county website. It's also, I believe, available on the Secretary of State's website, but you can use MVP to find this. Oh, you guys are asking questions so quickly. So the question is, in past years, Dems and blue campaigns have emphasized absentee voting. This year, is that being switched to early voting? Yes, I think so. I don't think there has been like a clear decision necessarily made for the primary or a big push, but I believe that that is going to be the push in over the summer as we move into the fall. How do we plan to handle long lines and need for water? I think it sounds like some elections offices are trying to figure out whether they can have like, I heard this at the Gwinnett Dems meeting yesterday, are trying to figure out if they can have out like a water cooler that's just there, sitting there. So their council is doing that. I mean, if that works, we can recommend that offices do that. I think that this is going to be another part of voter education, is educating voters to bring a water bottle, bring a snack. So yeah, this is a big issue. Is there an increase this time? People not knowing where they're registered to. I have not heard, this question is whether there's an increase in people not knowing if or where they are registered due to changes in the motor voter registration. So this is about that like issue. I have not heard that, but Martha?
From being on the hotline, yes, there is an increase about where people don't know where to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also I think partly that's due to precinct changes as well.
Yes.
Maps, people need to be educated on where and how to vote. Yes, redistricting has changed locations. We'll need to do a lot of sort of both because of this. You have to vote at your location, and redistricting. We're going to have to do a lot of voter education on where to vote. We're going to have, I would think, like 90 field organizers. And so, you know, I'm going to focus a lot on making sure that they know these basic rules, and that when they are like talking to voters, that this is going to be part of it. So like voter education is going to be like tied into, you know, like they are going to be having persuasion conversations to get people to support our candidates. But we know that in Georgia, it's really about getting people out to vote and making sure those votes count. So making sure that they know how to vote has to be a big part of what our organizers are doing. So I think, you know, they're always going to have that hotline number, and they are going to, they're going to have that hotline number, and they're going to have basic information as well. So Rebecca said, review again where folks can easily find out where to vote most easily. I mean, I think MVP does have a list of early voting sites. They can also go to, and this is updated to iwillvote.com. That's the DNC's website. And if you put in your address or your county, it'll show you early voting sites.
And actually, Naomi, Martha Reese is asking a question that you and Martha Laird and I had a conversation about. Necessary Trouble, as lots of folks on the call know, has had a work group of 30 to 35 troublers who have been in partnership with the Democratic Party of Georgia's voter protection team, something called the County Survey Rapid Response Team. So would you just say a little bit about what you know or don't know about the future of that group?
Yeah, I think I have a great project that I'm gonna need help on soon. And it's basically sort of re-updating that information, probably using a Google form so we can have it easily in one place. And making sure that we have the right contact for BOE members, election, like who the director of the elections office is, their website, if we have it. We are going to be using it for our liaison program, and also we'll be using, one of the big things that our liaison program is going to be working on this summer is mass challenges. And we want to have a really quick way to respond, but that means we're going to need to know the information of the Democratic BOE members so that our liaison can quickly get in touch with them and coach them on how, what to do if they get mass challenges. So this is like going to be a big lift, but it's going to be really, really, really useful to us. Like we would need it anyways, but especially because of the mass challenges, it's going to be like very important that we have the correct information and that we're really easily able to contact folks, because a lot of BOE members just don't know how to handle this, and they're getting inundated with thousands of challenges, and we expect it to increase over the summer. So we have created some checklists and resources for them so that they can hopefully handle these in the best way possible. And I mean, one of the bigger fears is that even if folks don't get taken off the rolls, or even if these are folks who have already moved and wouldn't be voting here anyways, this just really jams up the elections offices. And so it's taking away time that these people should be working on getting out absentee ballots, putting through registrations. They have a ton of work to do. And this is really just another way to try and mess with the elections, and make it harder for them to run a good election.
That's wonderful. Martha Laird, would you just say a little bit about whether you still need additional volunteers for that group, or not? Anything you want to add?
Yes, we definitely do need more people for that group. There are about 35 of us, and the counties have been divided into groups so that each person has 5 to 6 counties. But we need backups for those people so that if somebody's out of town, that backup could step in right away. Because as Naomi mentioned, we may have short turnaround times to gather information. So if you're interested, put your name in the chat and just say county survey by it, and we would include you right away on the first project that Naomi has slated for us, which she'll let us know more particulars about in the next couple of days. So please let us know, and this would be a commitment from now through November. One that's not onerous, but one that would be from now till then.
Wonderful. Martha, thank you very much. Naomi, can we ask you one last question?
Yes, of course.
So the last question, how can we help reach voters about the changes in a way that's not just on a flyer or a link? Often older voters will do what they knew before, and absorbing changes may not work by passing out flyers. Any recommendations?
I mean, I think part of this is going to be as part of like knocking on doors and telling voters, and really using data. So like if we see that someone, I think that we'll be able to get data that shows us like maybe who we were sending these things to before, absentee, like who voted absentee, so we can target those voters and tell them the changes in absentee voting. Who we're going to be able to look at provisional ballot data from the past to see who was voting out of precinct. And we'll be able to contact those voters and explain to them that they can't do that anymore. So we're like going to be able to do this education, I think, in like a really targeted way, so that we're really hitting the people who need to know it. Because yeah, it's confusing. There are a lot of changes. So, and, we need to make sure people know this information. So I think that's part of the plan, is to figure out who these particular voters are. And it's pretty cool that we're going to be able to like use past historical data and then target those voters individually through phone calls or knocking on doors.
Beautiful. And a reminder that this information will be part of, as Necessary Trouble does get out the vote work, it'll also be a lot of voter education work that we'll be doing at the same time. So, Naomi, thank you so very much. So much gratitude to you for coming to Georgia.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for coming to meet with us today. And we really look forward to an ongoing kind of partnership.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. And thank you so much for having me. And I'll stick my email and phone number in here if any of you ever need to get in contact with me.
Great.
So much.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And big gratitude to all the troublers that are already on the county, part of the county survey rapid response team. And this is a terrific way to put effort and energy. There is nothing more important than combating the voter suppression tactics. And so if any of you are still looking for where to put a little bit of extra time in 2022, put your name in the chat and Martha or Robert Brown will get in touch with you. So lots of gratitude. And we are going to go on to the second part of the program, which is very much related to this issue of voter education. because again, voter education and the Get Out the Vote effort are going to be hand in glove this year. And I'm going to turn this over to Karen Davenport, who is going to walk us through what the current necessary trouble electoral work looks like. Karen, I'm going to turn myself off and give it to you here.
Thank you, Becky. May I ask you one thing? Are you going to show the slides or do I need to show them to you?
What's your preference?
If I can operate them from what you've shown, I think I can do that.
You would have to have it on your computer. If it's on my computer, I will do it. Your call.
Okay, let me. Can you do it? Because
Absolutely.
I want us to move ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Becky. So our necessary trouble electoral work has been very connected to the DeKalb Democrats, and the DeKalb Democrats work under the parameters of the Democratic Party of Georgia, as well as the Federal Democratic Party. And we're centered under the principles of we as a party are centered under the principles that we work for a society that, number one, demonstrates fairness towards every citizen. Number two, works to put in legislation that demonstrates a caring environment for every citizen's needs. And three, demonstrates responsible behavior that supports our country's financial needs and national security and international security. It's also important to remember that our DeKalb Democrats' electoral goals are, number one, that we want to educate voters all year long on how their votes impact what happens or doesn't happen in their lives. And number two, we want people to know when and where they need to vote. So those are things that we are working on all the time. Next slide.
Just give me a minute here.
So I think it's important that we kind of remember the things that we need to thank Democrats for. Because of Necessary Trouble's work during the last election, we were able to elect Democrats on the federal, the state, and many county level positions. And our work truly made a difference. I think, it's good to sometimes take a deep breath and be thankful for the things that we have accomplished, because we're all very task-oriented and very busy. Sometimes we forget what we were able to accomplish and what would have happened if we hadn't done all the work that we did. So I think it's helpful for us to remember that we have a management system for the virus and the pandemic. I like to remind people that, if we hadn't done what we were supposed to do, there would be more people than, dead in Georgia and nationally. Because the current administration was not really dealing with that. President Biden launched an urgent wartime effort to get millions of vaccines into the arms of Americans and turn the U.S. into a global leader in terms of getting vaccines internationally. And he also made the expansion of the Affordable Care Act. It put more money in our pockets, $1,400 stimulus checks, $3,000 child tax credit in 2021, extended the benefits for the unemployed during COVID, and emergency housing assistance, provided support for working Americans, gave relief money for small businesses, supported the rights of workers to organize, and lowered the unemployment rate. In the current administration's diversity has been celebrated in terms of the people that are in cabinet positions as well as other positions, revoked the ban on people from Muslim countries, and definitely passed an executive order to combat discrimination based on gender orientation or sexual identity, and also passed an executive order advancing racial equality. In terms of education, there was $170 billion provided to public education and $35 billion in emergency funds for higher education. Next slide. Now, let's remember, particularly as we are all taking a deep breath, and thinking, no, what else can I do to help? What we could have accomplished if it hadn't been for Republican suppression is that we could have passed the Equality Act, which which prohibits discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender. We could have passed For the People access, which would have given us voter access, controlled political spending, and gotten rid of Citizens United, as well as put in place some governmental ethics procedures. We could have held Trump accountable. We could have raised the Wage Act, which definitely would have raised the wage nationally from $7.95 that it is now an hour. We could have passed the American Dream and Promise Act, giving a path to citizenship for people, for dreamers who were born in this country. And we could have passed Climate Action Now. And you all know that, yes, we have a 50-50, balance in the Senate, but we need more people elected who are definitely going to put in place those issues that I talked about earlier: fairness and caring and being responsible. So with these serious issues in our hands, in hand, I want to encourage you to join our circle of volunteers. Now, to join our circle of volunteers, these are people that are continuing our important work of fighting for democracy. We're going to tell you about all the work and encourage you to join us in one or more of these activities. So let me start first with our volunteer coordinators. Our volunteer coordinators in Necessary Trouble are the PAMs. Fortunately, they're not here today. They're traveling. So Pam Woodley and Pam Wouche are our coordinators. And the way that this works is generally we have lots of projects going on within the DeKalb Democrats. And I usually contact Pam Woodley and Pam Wouche and say, okay, we have envelopes and letters that we want to send out to our lowest voting precinct. And they call volunteers that might be willing to stuff envelopes and pull them together to finish that task. Or I also call them and say, we have an opportunity to text 50,000 primary voters who normally have voted in past primary elections to remind them of the early voting times and the sites, and also share with them forum information that keeps them more informed about the offices that we are voting on and the people that are running. Okay, let's go back to our circle of volunteers. Go back one time. Now we're going to talk a little bit about postcarding. And I am going to go to the slide on postcarding, please, Becky. And for our postcarding, go back one. Tara Doyle is going to speak first, and then Martha Abbott Shim is going to speak. So let's put the camera on Tara.
Hey everyone. So can you hear me and see me? Yeah, great, wonderful. So yeah, I've been postcarding for years now. I'm thinking of Donna Shapiro, who used to drop off, or I would drop off postcards from or to her, and more recently Martha. And what I really loved about it was something I could give to my elderly friends older than me, things that they felt comfortable doing and other things they were not comfortable doing. So working the hotline, or doing phoning, or cutting turf. They felt very comfortable doing that. And so I was almost a middle person between people like Martha and my elderly neighbors and my elderly friends. And so I think that that's a really wonderful place for folks who just aren't comfortable doing other things. We also, pre COVID, had some postcard parties where we had, colored pens and sat around tables at Becky's house and my house and Ann Walter Economy's house. So I think we'll get back to that again. But any of you who have ever received a postcard in the mail, I just think there's something about it. You will look at it. Unlike phoning, where I don't pick up the phone if I don't know the number. So I would love to hear what the percentage, like when Lou told us about signs, but I do think it's a wonderful thing to do in community, and also with our elder folk who really want to help with get out the vote.
Thank you, Tara. And now Martha.
Well, thank you, Tara. That's interesting comments and helpful. The necessary troublers accomplished so much this year. We mailed 2,250 postcards, and we orchestrated it. And when I say we, Kate King and I did the effort. Kate knew what to do. She took lead on the efforts, and she was just fantastic. And I'm sure Kate is listening, and thank you, Kate, so much. Now, for example, we had Imani's card, beautiful, both sides, but where do you write the name and address? Where do you put the stamp? So, as you can see, there's not much room there on the back. Kate came up with, we'll just buy address labels, and therefore we write the address on the white label, squeeze it in on the back of the card, and the individuals put the stamp up in the right-hand corner. Problem solved. Kate went out and bought address labels. We had to cut them, fit them onto the cards, make our stacks of 25. We did directions so that each pack had directions, 25 names and addresses, and basically that was it. They then could complete the task. Now, we had over 20 necessary trouble volunteers who made this effort possible. And then we had 5 groups, and that's similar to what Tara was talking about, because these groups were established and they've done this in the past. Now, I'm not sure they were all elderly people because I wasn't a member of some of the groups, but that was in a very effective way of accomplishing this. And Tara, I'll extend it to young people too. First time postcard writers, we could create all kinds of different groups geographically, so we're not driving very far. But when you get a group together, it's more fun. People can meet each other, talk to each other. And if there are any questions, the group leader is more informed and can answer them for them. So we had over the 20 volunteers who did it individually, and we had over 5 groups of people, and they had numerous people in each group. So those are the people that actually accomplished the 2,250 postcards that were written. And it's a huge shout out to all those efforts in Necessary Trouble. Fantastic, and thank you so much. So again, back to Kate. After all these accomplishments, she said, we really would be helpful to debrief about this. So we got together with Necessary Trouble leaders and we debriefed. And I think we'll have a streamlined distribution effort this time. As Tara said, the COVID interrupted somewhat the distribution efforts, but we decided the packs would be made and put into the coolers. Pat and Becky have always had blue cooler on their lower level where people can go pick up your Necessary Trouble t-shirts, and that's where we all had to go to pick up the Necessary Trouble postcards. But we'll just stack the cooler. So any volunteer now who wants to write postcards and the group leaders go get as many postcards as they need. And as I said to Pat and Becky, I have a blue cooler exactly that size. We'll pack that one too. And then once all the postcards are written, Necessary Trouble puts out an announcement saying, thank you, all postcards are written. And I forgot to tell you at the very beginning, after Kate and I and our worker bees who will help us make the packs of postcards, put them in the coolers, that's when we put out an announcement to Necessary Trouble. Everybody, postcards are ready. Go get them at Pat and Becky's. So that was a huge effort. And I think it really is going to be helpful to have this streamlined so that everything is in the cooler. People can go get one, do it. And if they find out it was so easy and quick, go get 5 more and do those. Or I am one who's also organized groups. So I really enjoy it when in fact, many of you I met through that kind of an effort. Now, in addition, with our postcarding, we came up with some suggestions that I don't have to share here, but it's suggestions that Necessary Trouble will mention to candidates before they get their postcards printed. Because, as I said, Imani's postcard is beautiful. It's slick. You can't write there. Almost all of the back was taken up with. We fit the address label right here and the stamp up here, but no place to write an individual message. So one of the things we came up with is we need to tell the candidates, leave room for an individual message to be written, because I think it's when you get the postcard, the receivers have reflected that they really like to see it's from the person and the name is signed. And if it's a message, it's a little bit more than just the name and address. So we accomplished it, and we thank everybody, and it was a huge effort, and I am amazed 2,250 postcards were sent. Thank you, Troublers.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful people who are doing postcarding. Fantastic. So let's move on to our next circle of volunteers who are involved with cutting turfs for canvassing. And unfortunately, let's show their picture, please. Robert Berry and Paula Anderson, who are traveling out of the country, have really been involved with cutting turfs for canvassing. And what this involves is they are very technologically skilled. They look up information on Vote Builder, and they put that information in minivans. So when you go out and canvass, they are targeting who you need to canvass based on their voting record and other information of people that we want to contact. So kudos to both of them for working on this wonderful, wonderful, bringing their wonderful skill set to help us be very focused when we are out canvassing or printing labels or doing other things where we are constantly contacting voters, giving them real important information. Moving on, our next wonderful volunteer has to do with canvassing, and I'm going to turn this over to Connie Venuso. All right, Miss Connie. She is here. She's on mute. Connie, you're on mute. Okay. All right, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Pam asked me to say a few words about canvassing. You know, I know it's not for everyone, but I really enjoy it. And during the last couple of years of the pandemic, I really missed it because we just didn't feel safe knocking on doors, and people really didn't want us to. But now that things are lifting up, I think we can safely get out there and do it again. Nothing beats the face-to-face contact with people. And, you know, it's surprising how accepting people are, you know, all the times I've been doing it for the last, I guess, 6 years, I've really rarely ever had anyone object or be annoyed, or, you know, most people are very appreciative. And, you know, I think maybe only half of the people that you knock on the door answer the door, but when they do, it's really great because you can have a wonderful, meaningful conversation. You can let them know about voter education, about the candidates and what they stand for. You can ask them what their issues are, what they care about, and they'll tell you. And a lot of times it's surprising, you know, there's things that you wouldn't have thought they would care so much about. And all in all, I think they appreciate being included in the process wherever they are. So it's something I have just really enjoyed and I've missed. When I canvassed for Stacy, I was absolutely amazed at how many people did not have any idea who she was, or even that there was an election coming up. And the same thing happened for Warnock. You know, I know we have better, like you were just talking about, you know, we may know more about these voters nowadays, but I still think it's very important to go to areas that are underserved. And I would say probably a big majority of my canvassing were in those areas that were underserved. And so I think they more than ever appreciated being included in the process. And even if they were not inspired to go out and vote immediately, a seed would be planted and they would know, we would let them know that they really counted, their vote counted, and how important it was to vote blue. And like Karen was saying, it's very important to let them know how important it is to vote down ballot and to vote Democratic because of all the things that the Democrats have done to help the average American. And nothing, like I said, nothing really beats the face-to-face contact. You can leave literature like we've been doing even all during the pandemic. We've left literature, but that's just not the same as having these face-to-face conversations. So it's a lot of fun. I hope people will try it. And the stakes have never been higher than they are now. So we really need to get out there between now and November and reach as many people as we can. So that's all.
Thank you, Connie. And Becky,
Sure.
would you add a few more points regarding the canvassing as to what some of
Yeah,
our goals are here?
happy to do it. And I'm going to do also some bald recruitment. Um, and I'm standing in here for the Pams, and it takes a village to replace the Pams. Um, uh, but let me say something because all the work that we're doing for Amani is is valuable in and of itself, but also valuable because it is a trial run for post-primary for the whole ball of wax. And so we are recruiting here both for the next 10 days, and we're also recruiting for the rest of the year. The thing about canvassing, and there's been a lot of talk in the chat about effectiveness, and nothing, nothing is as effective at increasing voter turnout as canvassing.
Yeah.
Nothing. So if you want to look at where you can put your time and your effort that will have more impact than any other place, it is canvassing. And we need more canvassers. Let me say something about the work for Amani so far. It has, I think everybody who has canvassed will say it has been a great experience. The very first list was a little rocky. After that, the lists have been fantastic. They've been all strong Dems, so there have been no negative responses. 90% of the people who end up being canvassed didn't even know Amani, and we're interested in the voter education materials. It's been a super positive experience. Um, and here's what we are. So here's what we have set up. There are eight. There are eight experienced canvassers that are willing to be mentors and buddies. And we want to recruit a few either new or rusty or just are not on the mentor list. We want to recruit a few more canvassers. It doesn't matter if you've ever done it before. We will support you. Karen McCowan has offered to do a little training in minivan. We will get you going. We will give you a buddy who knows how to do it. And if you don't want to knock doors, you can do lit drops, right? That is okay. So I want to recruit some folks here, and if you would be willing, to do some canvassing, hopefully in the next 10 days. But you can make a note of whether you'd be willing to do it once in the next 10 days or only after the primary. Um, if you would put your name in the chat, don't make me go back to the PAMs and say we didn't get anybody. That will just break their hearts, and they have worked too hard. So I have Karen Davenport saying she will canvass on 5/20. Martha Reese has canvassed before and would be willing. Martha, it's close by. It's been in Clarkston. Thank you. Um, Laura, would you be willing to do some canvassing?
I also like it. It's fun. I agree with Vanessa.
Excellent, excellent. Gareth, if you'd be willing to be a mentor buddy, that would be fantastic. And Carolyn Rose Avila, thank you so much. Very, very nice. Very nice. Anybody else who might be willing to be trained, be accompanied, even if it's lit drop, put your name in the chat. We don't need a massive number, but if we can increase our canvassers by just another couple of folks, it would help us enormously. So, Gareth, we will be in touch. And if anybody else is willing to put their name in that pot, put your name in the chat. Thank you. Yes, Tara, mostly in Clarkston. Excellent. Thank you very much. We're getting a few little pickups here. Okay, I'm going to stop recruiting. I'm going to turn Tara. Thank you, Jen Hogan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is like I feel like Rosea Shepherd when she's raising money.
Right.
Appreciate it. Excellent. Wonderful, wonderful. Philippa, hooray, hooray. You are making me so happy. You'll make the Pams happy. Beautiful. Okay.
Thank you so much, Becky. And now on to our next circle of volunteer, Mr. Lou Bowes.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. And Becky, that's a good segue because my background is always sales, marketing, and advertising. So my job was always to soften up the customer for the real sales pitch. And that's where the canvasser comes in. So they go to that ballot box. But all that said, having been that kind of background, I love driving around. And also, you get a little bit, you need to get rid of some of your anger, anxiety, and so forth. So getting out there gives me an emotional plus a physical release to go and do sign work. And I've done this for years because, being a travel salesman, I always look for good spots for different things. And it boils down to a couple of things like commercial, which I've been doing, and I had some good help from Ted Brothers. He went on vacation. I hope he's going to come back. Ted, we gotta need you for a few more days. And but then for the home canvassers, I really have had some very good success, and we need to talk to the potential candidates. I'm happy to go out with some of them also. But when you find someone who is really receptive, knows the candidate, and has a good place to put it, we say, "Would you like a sign?" And if you don't have a sign with you, take an address down and we get signs out there. So politicians like the signs. The political scientists have had a difficult time really giving a database quantitative effect of it. However, I did find that one article said 1.47% bump in voters turning out and that sort of thing, which actually, when you look at hundreds and hundreds of thousands, that's not too bad. So all that said, you'll find Amani signs through all the businesses on Covington Highway, Memorial Drive, up through Radon and some of those other places. Right now, I'm trying to finish up their 14 polling places in House District 86. And I've got, I think, 6 more to get signs up in front of. But it softens up, but it gets gets the name recognition out there, and that's an important thing. So we're trying to get Amani through, get her to be the candidate for House District 86, but then the big work comes up for November. So we'll be looking for a lot of help out there, and I'm happy to advise and work with folks that may be a little shy. But we'll get out there and do it. So that's my story, and we keep softening them up, and let's get them to the poll because this is an important year.
Thank you, Lou. And if you're interested in helping Lou pass out these signs, please put your name in the chat. We have 150 vote signs left that remind people about early voting, and then, you know, kind of keep up with them, and then we'll remind people about voting in the general election. And, you know, those of us who are steeped into all of this, and we have time to read and remember all this, but a lot of people, they need that visual reminder that, okay, it is time to vote and what I'm voting on. Okay, our last circle of volunteer that I am going to talk about is presentations. And we are involved in making presentations in a couple of different situations. One is we're working on making presentations at churches, and we're also working at making presentations in different events and different centers. And I think Terry Cruzon is on here. Terry just made a presentation at a senior picnic. At least thought I saw her on here. She's still here?
Yeah, she's here. Terry.
Where is Terry? I thought I saw her, but I don't see her on here.
I'm here now.
Okay, there you are. So Terry and Aquaria have been looking at different ways that we can have some experiences with different organizations. And Terry just went to a visit yesterday at the Decatur Rec Center. And I don't know if you could share a couple of minutes, Terry, about what that experience was like.
Good. It was a senior picnic, and they had about 40 people there with a lot of Decatur City staff. I think my key takeaway was the older seniors, they were on top of voting. They were either putting an absentee ballot in, they wanted to know where they could do early voting. It was the staff who were younger, who didn't know a lot about the changes in the voting laws. The senior people were on top of it. This is it was of all different backgrounds, primarily Black, but there were Latino there, where they're white, but it was the Decatur City staff that said, I know there's been changes in the voting laws, but what are they? So just talking about early voting, that you're not going to get an absentee ballot in the mail, that the drop boxes, I was just surprised. So there was a lot of very support from, I would say, the senior citizens. There were people there from mostly DeKalb, but there are people that come to the senior center that, from all over Gwinnett. And so knowing where to go in early voting now is getting late, but I think when we go back again into the fall, where people want to do the early voting, and there are of course people that just want to vote in person, and I guess just helping them know where to go to do that, because those changes have been in place. So that's my main feedback. It was very successful. It was fun. People knew what was going on, but just needed help to make sure they knew how to vote.
Thank you. And I want to encourage people to volunteer for this. You know, the thing that I remember, and I jokingly say, I'm on the last third of my life. I don't think I'll live another 72 years anyway. But, you know, I think sometimes when I remember when I was 25 or 30, I was so involved in so many other things, I don't know if I knew all the things that I know now about voting. So, you know, if you have some time and you're interested in going to different places and sharing information, we touch many, many people by our words and our actions. So in closing this
one more thing, Karen, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I have a list of places that are people that are retirement communities. I know because I live in Decatur, some of the condominiums. I may get that list out to you, Karen. If anybody knows people in there, you'll be able to get in easier. I happen to know people, do a lot of stuff with the city of Decatur. So they had no problem letting me in, talking to people. I think that's the best way to get into centers and have some face-to-face, either condominiums, senior centers, retirement communities. That would be a best way. And we could ask other people, because we're probably all going to know a lot of people that might be in Claremont Place or this or that, Arbor Terrace.
Right.
So,
Okay, thank you, thank you. And Aquaria is emailing, I think, all of the churches in the Atlanta area, so we'll be following up on that. So thank you very much for your attention on this circle of volunteers.
Thank you, Karen Davenport. Huge gratitude to Karen Davenport for all of her leadership, both within Necessary Trouble and DeKalb Dems. We are so fortunate to have this partnership and to have Karen as one of our Troubler leaders. Really great appreciation. Um, uh, and what we've been talking about is the Necessary Trouble electoral work, right? This whole second chunk, all the various pieces we have been and are doing for Amani, which we will, starting as after the primary, that will erupt into doing it for a much larger array of candidates. There are more categories of electoral work that Troublers are doing. And to talk about those, I'm going to turn this over to Pat Bird.
Yeah, there we go. In addition to the things that Necessary Trouble organizes, there are all kinds of things that we're doing with our allies, with groups like the DeKalb Dems or the Democratic Party of Georgia or New Georgia Project. And today we've got 7 troublers who will talk about what they're doing, but mostly why they're doing it, what it means to them, why they value this particular work. And we're doing this in a way that Mary Lou McCluskey has pointed out is very much like speed dating. Each person has about 2 minutes to talk about what they're doing and why they like it. After their 2 minutes, my job is to blow a whistle or something and say, all right, next, we're going on to the next person. So we're going to start with Ted Golden. And Ted, if you would unmute yourself and tell us about the work you're doing in the mayor's election over in Stonecrest.
Well, quick 10 seconds before that, I just got back last night at 3 a.m. from Selma, Alabama with Dr. Bernard Lafayette, celebrating his efforts with Selma and his persona. So I want to throw that in there. It's great seeing him again. I live in Stonecrest. I was part of the Public Safety Review Committee when Stonecrest was formed 5 years ago. And I personally warned them, my committee warned them, you got 3 to 5 years to get it straight, to get education and public safety headed in the right direction in order to have positive economic growth. It hasn't been done. So we had our issues down here with our mayor. He's been indicted and we're waiting his sentencing, but we have a new mayor's race that's open right now. And I'm supporting Dr. Charles Hill, primarily because number one, he's a friend. Number two, he's willing to work. I followed him at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. High School as the next president of the Booster Club behind him. And he did a great job, which made my job easier when I took over for him. So I know he can do some good things for Stonecrest, and he understands the importance of public safety and education and the link they have with economic development. So we've been doing all we can to try to get him acclimated to the political front. Sometimes difficult because he's so passionate, but it's a worthwhile opportunity. And I like to say it this way: our biggest wrinkle in DeKalb County is South DeKalb, and I'm not too ashamed to say that. We have to get ourselves together down here, because once we fix our issues, it fixes DeKalb. We can do things a whole lot better. We come from a position of strength, and down here in South DeKalb, we're not strong right now. So we appreciate the opportunity. We're hoping that we can be effective, and regardless of who becomes the mayor, I'll still be active down here. But I really want him to get in because I think we can do a lot more with people who are willing to work towards positive gains and not tear us down any further than we already are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. That's an important work that you're doing there, and we look forward to having reports from you of your success after the election. Denise Miller, if you would unmute yourself. Denise is a block captain here on McConnell Drive and has been doing that work.
Hi. So Pat asked me to talk about what is a block captain, and essentially a block captain is someone who is part of a neighborhood. Usually I would assume most block captains live in the neighborhood where they're doing their volunteering. And essentially the role is to make sure that people in the neighborhood have all the necessary information to vote. So it's making sure everyone's got info about is their registration up to date? Making sure new people who have moved to the neighborhood have the information they need to change their voter registration. Making sure people know where their voting location is. So in our particular area, which is now delineated as Thompson Park, there are 5 of us that kind of work together to make sure that we're spreading the information out, and we've kind of divvied up the territory to make sure everybody's covered. So other, and it's, this work is regardless of your neighbor's political affiliation, you're making sure all your neighbors have the ability to vote. And for instance, if people need rides to the polls, make sure they have info about how to do that on election day, all those kinds of things. There's also an aspect of trying to help the county make sure they have up-to-date information about the voters in a particular neighborhood. And that's through Minivan. I have to say I'm a bit delinquent on that aspect of the work. But so why do we value block captains and having that role in a community? It brings a more personal touch to the neighbors, and they know that there's someone they can turn to if they have questions. They don't just have to go online. They can call a neighbor to ask questions. And not to reiterate all that's been said already, but the work is important because Georgia is the most important swing state in the nation right now. So new neighbors that come into a community, those making sure that they're registered could make a huge difference, because there's so many new residents to the Atlanta area. So having block captains cover every single neighborhood is really important. It's not a huge job. It doesn't take, well, especially where I live, it's not taking a huge amount of time and energy, but it's definitely worthwhile work.
Thank you, Denise. We'll be putting out a follow-up to the meeting that'll have contact information if you are interested in learning more about the block captain program. You'll get it there. And if you'll unmute yourself, Karen McCowan, and talk about data collection and data analysis.
Sure, absolutely. Could I? Fantastic. You're way ahead of me. So as a consultant, data analysis was a big part of my professional work for many years, and it's a useful skill that's also carried over into my volunteer life. That's because although you can find out a lot of what you may want to know on the internet, it's often not exactly what you're looking for. But used appropriately, data analysis can enable you to home in on the questions that you want to answer. In other words, to find out what's so. Sometimes your results are what you'd expect to find, but often there are some surprises. But even if the data shows something you rather not see, it can provide a baseline for improvement. Next slide, please. So, I need to go to my next slide. I think the biggest misconception about data analysis is that you have to be a math whiz to do it. But I'm here to tell you that that's not necessarily true. I'm sure it's terrific if you are great at math, you could do some sophisticated things, but you can do a lot just with basic math and algebra. In addition, the ability to think through a problem and to recognize patterns in your results are key skills, and those aren't necessarily math skills. Lastly, learn to use Excel. Learn to use some of the simpler functions in Excel. Again, basics will take you a long way. Math was always a struggle for me, but I took some adult education classes and some tutoring that really helped. And I'd like to recommend a couple of books. One is called all the math you'll ever need, which is a very basic self-teaching guide that will review things for you that may have gone right over your head in junior high or even elementary school. The other is Excel for Dummies. I highly recommend all of the Dummies series for any software you need to learn. It'll tell you 90% of what you need to know. So I hope this was helpful, and I will put some information in the chat that for where you can buy these materials.
Thank you very much, Karen. It's important to as we think about the work that we're doing, to think about and tell people why we're doing it and what we value about it. At this point, Gail Whatley, if you could unmute yourself and talk with us about the Voter Protection Hotline and why you're so excited about it.
You bet. Sure. Can you hear me? Good. Yeah. Well, I love the hotline. I've been doing the hotline since 2018, and it's back then it was downtown. We all met in this huge big room full of phones and people on the phones and lists and updates tacked all over the walls and lawyers scurrying around answering every question. And it was this great team effort that these days, since COVID, of course, it's all online now. So I have about 10 different websites up on my computers while I'm working a shift, but we have digital platforms where the team can stay in touch even when we're sitting in our own homes at home. And there really is a great camaraderie it's very supportive because there's so much to know. And that's one of the reasons I love it, is I have learned so much. There's a lot of training and a lot of information from the support of the volunteers who volunteer to be agents on the line. But it's also, I'm not speaking very well. Sorry, performance anxiety. I'm not a very good public speaker. I do better on the phone one-to-one with a person. But anyway, why is it gratifying? Because every single vote counts, as everybody has said, and I'm talking to individual voters, and over and over and over again, it's clear to me that somebody was able to vote because I was able to help them, and that's just wildly satisfying. A quick story, one of my favorite stories, there was a young man who believed he would never be able to vote. He had he told me his whole story. He'd gotten into some trouble with bad friends or unfortunate associations. He'd ended up in jail for a little while, but he was out. He totally turned his life around. He'd learned all kinds of things, family, all of that. But he believed that he was a second-class citizen and would never be able to vote again. He had met someone doing voter registration in a mall somewhere who had said, oh no, I don't know, probably you can, gave him our number for the hotline, and he called up the hotline, and it sounded like he'd finished his probation. He was long done with all of his debt to society and should have been fine. So I gave him a resource that he could contact to make sure that he actually was off paper. And I would never have known that myself, but the hotline resources are just vast and deep. And the hotline could provide me with a resource to give him so that he could determine that, yes, indeed, he was off paper. I looked him up in the Secretary of State's My Voter page. That volunteer had effectively registered him to vote. His registration was current and active. So I directed him to the nearest early voting location, and he began to cry. He wept on the phone with me at the gift I had given him, that he now was able to vote again. Thought he never would. Anyway, it was a great moment. And almost everybody is really appreciative. These people are calling us because the situation's all complicated and changing all the time, and they want help and advice. So it's not like calling folks. I'm not calling folks cold myself. They're calling us, and they really, really appreciate the help. So I love it. and another function of the hotline, actually, besides helping individual voters, is data collection. We track trends of what's going well or what's going wrong. And if there are problems coming up at particular polling places or particular voter suppression kind of things that are rearing their ugly heads, we log every single call where we talk to a voter, and the National Democratic Party, as well as the Georgia Democratic Party, can respond to issues. It's apparently very valuable data collection, comes from all those calls also. But right now, the hotline is gearing up using for the midterms, obviously, but kind of getting the lay of the land to figure out how to deal with all of the voter suppression issues that have been so rampant with the new laws and the newly drawn districts. A lot of times people will call up and think they know where to go to vote. Oh, I've always gone to this elementary school, always, and the districts are changed and it's in there, and they would have gone to the wrong place. So, but then, I lost the train of thought. Anyway, so right now we're just gearing up, figuring out how to help voters in the new landscape, the way it is with all the new changes going on, and pretty much running the hotline with veteran agents who are familiar with the systems already. But starting in the summer, they will be recruiting new volunteers, doing training and onboarding for more people who will need a lot more folks heading for the November election. So anybody who's interested in joining the team of hotline volunteers, I would happily give you the contacts for the leaders who will. They say we're not training new people or accepting new volunteers right now, but they would happily take names. And so I'll give you their email addresses if anybody else would like to.
Thank you so much, Gail. And we'll be if you'd put that your email address in the chat, and we'll pass that information on along. It's good to know that there'll be opportunities opening up in the summer for new people to get trained to be in the hotline. Now we're moving on to Raynell Solar, who's a first-time poll manager. Raynell, if you'd unmute yourself and tell us about what you're doing and why you're like.
All right. Yes, I am a first-time poll manager. And basically, it is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
Sorry. I get emotional. My job is to make sure everyone that comes into that precinct gets to vote. Every registered voter who comes in gets to vote. And it's a lot of work. And basically it's the organization, the resources, and the staff that determines whether or not you have to wait in line to vote or not. And a lot of that falls on the poll manager to make sure things are organized. And if things flow well, you can be in and out in 5 minutes. If they don't, and people don't know what they're doing and the machines don't work because you haven't been trained, the lines just build, and build. And then people get tired of waiting and they get hot and they want to go home. So I accepted the responsibility to make sure, as well as I can, people can have a positive experience. And with that, I'm going to take a moment to do a little recruiting. I have recently found out that my precinct is short 2 staff members. And so if you're available and you want to get into poll working, I have 2 spots. One is an admin clerk, and the admin clerk basically, picks up the green voter cards, make sure those don't go out with the voter, and the monitor clerk. So you get the paper ballot out of the printer, that make sure that ballot actually goes into the scanner, because someone can walk right out with their paper ballot thinking they touched the screen and they voted. So the monitor clerk is there to make sure every paper ballot gets from the printer into the scanner so it gets voted and counted. So anyway, I will put my name in the chat. So if anyone is interested, there are short trainings required, you know, an hour or two. So anyway, if you're available on election day and you want to work at Boulevard, I need some more help. So that's what I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you, Raynell. We know that you would be a great person to work with. So I hope some troublers will take you up on going in and getting trained with you to do that efficient work to get people to vote and to get out. Now we'll talk to hear from Linda Gooding. If you'll unmute yourself, Linda, and talk about what is a volunteer provisional clerk and why you like it.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, excellent. Okay. I am doing poll work for the first time in my life this time. And my tendency is to lean toward things that are, you know, essentially issues of fairness. And that's why I got so involved with fair districts. And now doing the poll work for me also is, as Raynell said, I feel like it's my job as the provisional clerk to do my very best to see that everyone who's got some problem with their paperwork has an optimal opportunity to vote. The poll trainers have told us that 75% of Georgians will have some change to something this time. And so there's been a problem with a change in the motor voter. Motor voter was instituted in 2016. The default was when you did something with your driver's license, you were automatically registered to vote or your registration changed, to the point where in 2020, Georgia had 95% of eligible voters were registered to vote, which is something that we should all be extremely proud of. And so in addition to the changes in districts, however, the motor voter thing has changed too. And so they've gone from 80% of people who get their driver's license being registered to vote. Now it's down to 40. It's a difference of 1 million people a year. And so nobody, the AJC's reported on this a couple times, but nobody really knows what's going on. So it is at least possible that a lot of people are going to come in and need provisional ballots this time that didn't need it before. So I said I would be the provisional clerk for our precinct, which is or a nearby precinct, primarily because Pam Woodley asked me to do it. But again, I think that Georgia's we've done really well with registration. There might be some extra hiccups this time, and so that's why I volunteered to do it. That's it.
So provisional clerk means you're working with provisional ballots.
Right.
Okay, I had no idea. I thought it would be part-time clerk.
No, and each precinct gets just a small set of provisional ballots because there are usually very few. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens this time. That's why I put the question in the chat about whether or not there have been more problems this time. And apparently there have been, so.
Thank you, Linda. And Linda Grant is going to talk about her work as a member of a 3-person panel to the voting review. Linda Grant, if you would unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. I will be serving on something called a vote review panel. And vote review panels oversee the scanning of the absentee paper ballots. I'll be doing this in Fulton County. And these panels have 3 people, as Pat said, 1 Republican appointee, 1 Democratic appointee, and 1 election official. So When the absentee ballots are scanned, they may be rejected, and that's where the vote review panel comes in. If the ballot is damaged, that's easy. The panel oversees the creation of a duplicate. If voter intent is not clear, the panel determines voter intent. And this has to be done, of course, in a nonpartisan way and according to Georgia law. What drew me to this work? I think like every single one of you, and kudos to you, Renelle, it's a deep desire to do something to protect the integrity of the vote. I did something similar in 2020 with Fulton County absentee ballot processing monitoring. And as a result of that experience, I have a much clearer understanding of the whole voting process. And I think a deeper appreciation for the dedication of the people who work behind the scenes. There has been so much, there have been a lot of threats. We've read about the threats and intimidation of the election supervisor in Fulton County, who I worked with in 2020. And these are dedicated people who really care about doing the right thing. So, you know, it's been a valuable experience, and I think this will be a challenge for me too.
Thank you, Linda. It's an important and potentially stressful, I would think, work. And we look forward to hearing after the election from you about how it went. The thing about being a member of Necessary Troubler is that we're troublers, and that means we get out and do stuff, all kinds of different things. And we look forward to hearing from you about the work that you're doing or helping you find a place to be a troubler. Becky, take it back.
Thank you. And here is a huge and tremendous shout out to all those folks we just heard from. This is the work that keeps democracy going. This is also what democracy looks like. If there is any piece that you have heard about that you want to do and you don't see an obvious way to plug in, put your name in the chat. Put your name in the chat and what you're interested in, and we will hook you up. And if you don't know where to put your time, put your name in the chat, and we will call you, and we will figure this sucker out, because we want everybody's spare time this year, because everything, increasingly, everything depends on these state elections more than ever. Everything depends on them. I want to do a couple of things. We're getting close. Please hang in with this just a few minutes more. I want to make one pitch here for t-shirts. We have these gorgeous t-shirts, and we're going to be putting in another order tomorrow, May 15th. And so if you would like a Troubler t-shirt and you do not yet have one, Martha Laird, if you would put the order link in the chat, that would be fantastic. It is a wonderful way to support Necessary Trouble and to be a walking billboard. And those of us who have them and who walk around in them all the time get tons of feedback around them. So and thank you for those of you who are putting your cameras on the shirts. And plus they're just really gorgeous. So Martha Laird has just put the link in. If you go and order tonight, then we will put your order in tomorrow and you'll have it in the next 10 days. And the next order is not going to be for a couple of weeks. So kind of the last chance for a little while. It is really meaningful. And one of the things I would like to do before we talk about the last meeting is share something in closing. Some of you have seen this. I think it is a supremely powerful articulation of this moment. So stay with me here.
bans in the United States. 1. Let's get this reasons to stand up today against abortion bans in the United States. 1. Let's get this straight. When the penalty for rape is less than the penalty for abortion after the rape, you know this isn't about caring for women and girls, it's about controlling them. 2. Through forcing them into motherhood before they're ready, these bans steadily sustain the patriarchy, but also chain families in poverty and maintain economic inequality. 3. Pregnancy is a private and personal decision. It should not require the permission of any politician. 4. For all time, regardless of whether it's a crime, women have and will always seek their own reproductive destinies. All these penalties do is subdue women's freedom to get healthy, safe services when they most need them. 5. Fight to keep Roe v. Wade alive. By the term overturn Roe v. Wade, the main concern is that the Supreme Court will let states thwart a woman's path to abortion with undue burdens. But one thing is true and certain. 6. These predictions aren't a distortion, hypothetical, or theoretical. Women already face the disproportion of undue burdens when seeking abortions. If the sexes in all people are to be equal, abortion has to be actually accessible and not just technically legal. 7. Despite what you might hear, this right here isn't only about women and girls. This fight is about fundamental civil rights. Women are a big part of it, but at the heart of it, our freedom over how fast our families grow goes farther and larger than any one of us. It's about every single one of us. 8. Fight for Roe v. Wade in the United States, because this change can't wait. We've got the energy, the moment, the movement, and the thundering numbers. The alt-right's biggest blunder is that most Americans aren't under their impression that a woman's body is up to them to decide. So when you're outraged, these lawmakers are terrified. They want our tide to lose hope, to back up, pack up, and go home. So don't. We won't. We are never alone when we fight fire with feminism. So go. Be unafraid. We will not be delayed. We will not be masquerade to the tale of a handmaid. We will not let Roe v. Wade slowly fade, because when we show up today, we're already standing up with the tomorrow we made.
So there's the voice. There's the voice for the moment. Our next meeting is going to be on Sunday, May 15th. I'm sorry, not Sunday, May 15th. Sunday, June 12th. Sunday, June 12th at 4 p.m. That's the meeting where we're going to be deciding collectively which House districts we will be focusing on, in addition to focusing on all up and down the ballot, in addition to focusing on electing Stacey Abrams and Senator Warnock. We look forward to having you there. I am so grateful. We are all so grateful for everybody who has participated today, and all the good, strong, effective troublers and hard work going on. It is so impressive. And once again, if you don't have the place where you have already been plugged in, if you have more available, put your name in the chat and we will find a spot for you. And what I would love to do at this point is ask everybody just to unmute yourself and just do a huge shout out for all the good work that is already being done and that will continue to be done, and all the people that you've heard from today. So
All right.
Oh, huge gratitude. And last questions in the chat. Carolyn, I will get you the t-shirt. I will find out when your t-shirt will be ready. We only submit orders every couple of weeks. If you have already ordered a t-shirt and you have not picked it up and you've gotten an email that it's ready, please go and pick it up. And thanks to all of you for all the wonderful work. Love to every single buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
You're so organized. I love it. Blessings.
Pat, don't turn it off yet. I'm just catching up on the chat. Very nice.
Adiós, gracias.
Adiós, adiós, Laura. Muchísimas
Adiós.
gracias. Roz Mance may be able to canvas on Thursday. Fantastic. Roz, you're muted.
I'm very rusty, but I have done it before. But I would like to go with somebody who's
experienced.
Yep.
Excellent. We'll get you. And this Thursday. Fantastic. Bless you, bless you, bless you. That makes me so happy.
Great.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Roz.
Lovely to see
Love
you,
to you.
Kitty. Yeah,
love to you.